Hi everyone, Dom Famularo back again, the Artist Series at a Distance. This is magic at the highest level because I've got one of my favorite musicians that I have listened to for many, many years who continues to inspire me, even recently when I heard him perform just a few months ago, continues to inspire me, continues to inspire everyone. Would you please welcome the great Mr. Paul Shaffer.
Sweet of you to say. Thanks for having me.
Paul, I love your humility, which you always have, but I got to tell you something. You as a performer, as a producer, as a musical director, as an actor, as an arranger, there are many different hats that you've worn in this industry that has allowed you to have this level of flexibility to do all of these different roles in this entertainment field. That's pretty amazing. Not many people, have the ability or talent to do that.
Well, thank you. Certainly had varied interests, and I think you have to kind of do something extra. Although with everything that I have done, I always think back, now that we all have a little more time on our hands, back to my early days arriving in New York and getting involved in the session scene right away was so thrilling to me, and really my favorite times because you were there because of musical reasons, for your musicality, if you will, and that, of course, I value the highest of anything that all the different things I got to do.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about the early years. I mean, you started playing as a youngster, and what inspired you to lead towards piano?
My parents up in Canada, Northern Ontario, Canada, were the type of parents who said that kid is going to take piano lessons and play the piano, no matter what he's. And that's just the way it is. I think Jewish parents of that era, God bless them, they either raised violinists or pianists. And my mother was a pianist herself, and played classically with music. And I remember being an infant, being under the piano. We had a grand piano under there, listening to the whole thing roar, And then when I was 6, I think, she started me on piano lessons with a lovely teacher named Mrs. Hardy. And then she stopped herself. Once she got me going, my mother never played again. Well, I thought it was interesting. Her work was done. She got me going. She always had music in the house, though. Her stuff, Chopin, her favorite, and Ethel Merman and Mary Martin at Carnegie Hall, that album. And then my dad, but she made sure there was music playing all the time. That was part of her strategy. And my dad, when he got home on the weekends, he put on his music, which was the great jazz vocalists. He loved, Sarah Vaughan was his favorite, and he loved Billy Eckstine. And, Sinatra, of course, was, number one with him. And so this all being in the house, one piano lesson, and I learned middle C. And then when I came home, I figured out that on the black notes, you could play the whole Lone Ranger song, the William Tell Overture, with just one white note. And I don't know, I was fascinated by the fact that I could hear something and figure out how to play it.
Interesting.
And that just, that became fascinating. And instead of practicing my lesson, I would do that stuff. Mm-hmm. And then when I started to hear rock and roll on the radio, and I heard it a little later up in Canada. It reached us perhaps a little later when all stations in town went exclusively rock and roll at the same time. Well, this was like magic to me, and I started hearing songs like 100 Pounds of Clay by Gene McDaniels, which was so emotional and soulful to me. And those 4 chords, once I figured them out, I could play all the songs. And this was, and I didn't buy records as a kid. I just figured them out and would learn how to play them. Play them really loud on the piano and just get the sound all up in my ears as if I was playing the record.
Well, there must have been an incredible influence, because what I'm so amazed, Paul, at what you do, it's absolutely incredible how many songs that you have prepared, not only when you were doing the Letterman show and you had different artists coming on, what you had to learn for that, but just your general library of songs is so huge.
Lovely Mrs. Hardy, my classical piano teacher, As you know, at that time anyway, piano teachers would discourage their students from developing their ear because they said you won't learn how to read. You'll fake it for the rest of your life. You'll learn how to, you'll watch me play it and we'll learn it by ear and you'll fake. And that's what I did. She was right. But Mrs. Hardy was different. She said, well, your ear, she appreciated it. She said, what you'll miss on the sight reading test, you'll make up on the ear training, and she encouraged my ear, but I never really learned to sight read. I can read and I can arrange and write and I know harmony and counterpoint, but I just can't sight read. That's a question of time, putting in the time doing it. And I was more concerned with playing Dawn Go Away, I'm No Good For You on the piano. I don't know, maybe because I couldn't read, but I memorized everything. And I still remember them. A lot of the songs, that come up, I played it as a kid, whether it was trying to play my dad's music, he could sing and loved to do like Tenderly, the evening breeze caress the trees tenderly, and I had to learn that so I could play it for him. And now I'll always know Tenderly. I can play that. It's just that, and again, I can't sight read. Chalk it up to that.
So you learn these tunes by ear, which embedded into your brain, which have been helpful throughout your entire career. So when did you make the move from Canada down to New York? When was that move happening?
Raised in Thunder Bay, Ontario, went to college in Toronto, University of Toronto, studied sociology, psychology, which is what you take when you don't know what you're going to do, because being a musician was too far-fetched for a Canadian. We're so humble up there. A Canadian would say to me, who do you think you are? Eh? You think you're going to be on a show or something, eh? That's the attitude you get up there. And so I would never have thought I could get on a show or anything. And I don't know what I was going to be. And when I graduated, I just said to my parents, let me take that classic year off. How many of us? I just saw Felix from the Rascals in concert, and he said the same thing.
He did it, yeah.
A year to make it. And me too. And I played in Toronto, what we call casuals here in the U.S., just whatever you can get, a bar mitzvah. And then I would play for people's auditions too. I'd learn a song with a singer, we go to audition, I accompany her, and two friends of mine auditioned for Godspell, a 70s rock musical, 1972. Companies all over the world, started off Broadway. Company forming in Canada, in Toronto. Stephen Schwartz, the terrific composer of the music in town. My girlfriends play their songs, and he hired me. He liked the way I played one of his tunes. One of them girls played one of the tunes from the show. He hired me that day. I played Godspell a year in Toronto and then came to New York, 74, to play for Stephen on Broadway in the Magic Show, a show with the late magician, Doug Henning, Stephen Schwartz building the songs around him and a little plot. That's how I came to New York to work for him, Stephen.
So once that show, the Magic Show, which was a huge show, Doug Henning, it was
lasted a long time, 5 years, I think. I played it for 1 year, though.
Legend in the magic industry. So how did you then connect with Saturday Night Live?
When Godspell, my run up there ended, a year run in Toronto, Stephen, hadn't called me yet. He wasn't calling, but I now was a theatrical musician. I had a reputation there, and I started doing some other shows. And one of the shows I did, the producer said, I'd like you to use on horn my friend Howard Shore, who came into the band on sax, and he and I hit it off. He turned out to be Lorne Michaels' best friend. And when Lorne came to town to produce Saturday Night Live, Howard came with him as his musical director. I was in town playing the Magic Show, and Howard called me up, can you do this? We're coming to do this new thing, Saturday Night Live. And I said, Howard, I am not the right eye. I can barely sight read. It's going to be, new charts every week. And he just said, don't worry about it. We'll have time. You'll have time to rehearse, and he really had to kind of talk me into doing it. But that is how that's how I got that gig, because there was so many Canadians involved.
Where do you think that level of confidence comes in, where you just, even though you felt you weren't really prepared, you went there and you took it? What's that driving force that you have that allows you to?
Really had to, God bless him for this, but he really had to calm me down. I had an anxiety attack one night. I got to call him and tell him I can't do it. I'm trying to learn remember the difference between a whole note and a half, a semi-quaver and a hemi-demi semi-quaver, which was my education. And I just said, Howard, I can't, and it's not going to be like that. I was thinking of a variety show, like we had one in Canada where new performers every night, new charts and stuff. And I even wrote a few charts for this show. But I said to myself, the piano player is going to cite me. I can't believe it, Sure enough, he would, and that would surprise me. I'm picturing that. But Howard said it's going to be, one artist at a time. We'll have time before. And he gave me the confidence. What more can I say?
It's amazing because with the confidence that you had, and even though you were nervous, you went there and you discovered skills and talents that you were now developing that were working. You were giving them what they needed.
In thinking about it, before I knew it, I was in the studios. Phil Ramone, the great producer, was the sound designer on The Magic Show and the producer of the soundtrack album. So I got to be in the studio with Phil Ramone, who used me on something else, a Burt Bacharach record. And here it's 1975, and I'm playing side by side with Burt Bacharach. I couldn't believe it. But as I look back now and started to figure out why, I see maybe it was because I loved rock and roll and pop music. And I was a keyboard player. And perhaps many of the keyboard players who were already ensconced here in New York were jazz players, a little older. They were condescending to play rock and roll. They didn't like it. Triads, the chords are just so simple, but they could play it. But I was dying to play it, And that may have been the reason, because I started to hear people say, he knew the contemporary styles. And yes, I did. I could play like Jerry Lee Lewis. I could play like Elton John, whatever you need. And not everybody knew that Elton John was as great as he is. Worth studying, but I did, and I think maybe that was why.
So it's kind of interesting because then you went on, I think it was in 77, you did the series, the CBS comedy series, A Year at the Top, and that was produced by Norman Lear and Don Kirshner, which are, again, two huge names in the industry.
I know, huge. So I don't know how, I'm moving so fast, I don't know why I was blessed in some way. But one of the guys who played the lead in Godspell Toronto was a New Yorker, really, Don Scardino. Went on to direct a lot of television, most recently Tina Fey's show, 30 Rock. But back then he was an actor, and he said to me, I just got him in the Magic Show, and he said, I auditioned for a thing. Don Kirshner and Norman Lear are going to do a rock sitcom like the Monkees, but the 70s, and I've gotten a part in it. And I told him about you, because they're supposed to be, they make an act like the Monkees. They make records afterwards and they go on tour and stuff. I thought maybe they'd like somebody who could really play in the band, and you're kind of funny too. So I auditioned for Kirshner, and he said yes. Took me out to LA, auditioned for Norman Lear, and I got the role. And there I am. Now I'm in Hollywood, can't believe it. Hollywood swinging on by Kool and the Gang is on the radio, and I'm saying, that's me. The song is about me. And I made this show. We made a pilot. The pilot was shelved. Saturday Night Live started, but then the pilot was taken off the shelf 3 years later and became a series on CBS. And I left Saturday Night Live in the second season, went back to Hollywood to do it. We made 5 episodes. They played in the summer of 77. They weren't successful. Luckily, I got my old job back on SNL, but I brought with me an impression of Don Kirshner because he was a classic historic guy who was the great publisher from the Brill Building days.
Yeah.
Carole King and Barry Mann, Cynthia Weil and Neil Sedaka were writing for him and stuff. You hear about the cubicles, people writing with piano. That was him with those cubicles. Then he had a second career. Don Kirshner's rock concert he was huge again, but on camera, on rock concert, he was a hilarious character.
Yeah.
I was there. He said, I want you to come and see me. You know, he's very fast talking, a show business guy. You know, forget about it with the cubicles and the Carole Kings and the Sadakas, and we never looked at a contract. But when he got on camera, he slowed right down and he rose up and he said, I'm Don Kirshner, and this is rock concert. You know, so I started doing this on SNL, and I just sneaked it in. We did a little intro for a piece. I was kind of writing stuff, you know, too, special material, as we called it way back then. And there was a piece that Bill Murray's brother, Brian, was writing, and he said, how about a piece where Garrett Morris does Tina Turner in drag? And we had a character on the show, Mr. Mike, and he said, we'll do Mr. Mike and Tina. But we need somebody to explain this. I said, well, I could introduce it as Don Kirshner. And then, you know, they said, sure. Well, what a loose show it was.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, you know, that's how I got into kind of doing some on-camera stuff. Dave Letterman noticed me playing behind Bill Murray, you know, his lounge singer bit. And after 5 years on Saturday Night Live, and then 2 years went by, Letterman show called. Dave had a show in the morning that wasn't successful. He's going to be on after Johnny Carson, and he's still, you know, he's looking for a band leader, and somehow I got hired.
Somehow. Well, I think
that's it. Good night, everybody.
Well, I think David saw the potential of the incredible talent that you were and the character that you are, Paul. First of all, there's a movie somewhere in your life that's got to be put together, because the fact of how fate led you from scenario to scenario, and each of these were involved with people that were such talented people. When you did the Broadway show for Gilda Radner, I mean, that in itself was an incredible, you know, gig, I'm sure, just working with her and arranging her music.
Well, you know, she was in that 1972 Godspell show in Toronto.
Interesting.
She's from Detroit, but was living in Toronto at the time. I think she had moved up there with a boyfriend. And she was in theater there and auditioned for Godspell that same day that I got hired. So did she. She would write song lyrics for her characters. Like she had one, a parody of Patti Smith that she used to do, called Candy Slice, where she would wear a sleeveless white beating T-shirt, you know, and use profanity. And she wrote one song called Gimme Mick on Mick Jagger. And I would write the music for her and stuff. And the Broadway show really was a collection of these songs that we had written together, except for one that Mr. Mike wrote, Let's Talk Dirty to the Animals. Nobody cursed and swore in a cuter way than Gilda Radner.
So what's incredible is that you led from great talent to great talent. You kept on. There's got to be, you know, a reason for that within your personality that allows people to feel comfortable with you enough that they trust you, they believe in your talent, and you are easy to work with.
I hope you're right. I don't know. I certainly had a lot of experience working with performers and working with stars. And, you know, I think that I got to work with so many great performers who had influenced me and that I had studied, and maybe it came through, you know, they could tell that I knew their music a little bit, and I would just give it up, you know, as far as respect. So many of the musicians that I know here say, you know, the Beatles on Sullivan, that's when I became a musician. I bet a good deal of the people that you have interviewed say that.
Over 80%, including me.
Yeah. But I'm in Canada. Maybe I'm older than you, perhaps, but I don't know. You know, I was watching Ed Sullivan and I saw the Four Seasons. That just killed me.
Interesting.
Four Seasons sound was undeniable, and Jackie Wilson and stuff like that. You know, we loved American music, I guess, up in Canada. It always blows my mind when you Americans say, you know, I'm American now, by the way, but, you know, the Beatles, what an influence. these Brits had. Just incredible.
It really was. And you are correct. In all of these interviews, everyone goes back to that date, February of 1964. I was 11 years old. And when I heard them play, I was just mesmerized by the magic of it. And I was drawn to the drums. And I said, that's what I want to do. And myself and players like Liberty DeVito and Kenny Arnoff all say the exact same thing. So for yourself, what's interesting enough is that here you are now, this leads you to the Letterman show. And now you are backing up historic musicians on that show, and you've got to learn their tunes and perform with them and prepare all this. So it couldn't have been anyone more perfect for that position than you.
I think you're right. I was a man for the job.
Yeah.
Maybe watching Sullivan as a child, although we all did, but maybe that prepared me. Thinking about the Four Seasons and how the keyboard player, Bob Gaudio, was always somehow his keyboard and his mic were always way upstage. Or his mic over here, keyboard up here, so he's always, Sherry baby, he's always having to reach way over for the mic, So I always thought about that when I was doing the same thing, reaching for my keyboards and stuff.
Boy, it's amazing how the influence of all these different characters that you pulled from, that you evolved into. So you're doing the Letterman show. How did you organize yourself? There's a business side of what we do here for the Artist Series. And we want this next generation to kind of see and hear how people were able to organize their business skills and put together all this. Did you have a book that you kept a record of all these dates and organized? How'd you do all this?
No, I was pretty disorganized. Yes, I mean, as far as dates, when I was freelancing, yes, we had a book. There was no iPhones. Right. You had a date book. You would write in your dates, a jingle, and then you would know. Sure, at the end of the year, you would see all his dates and you would know. But I was, like so many of us musicians, I think we're afraid of business. Wouldn't you say that's true? Yeah. We get ripped off so much because we just don't want to think that there's somebody else who's trying to figure out how to profit from our music. We don't want to think about it, so we don't. Yeah. We just make the music and then we complain later. That's what I observe anyway.
So when you were doing all this stuff between the Broadway shows and Saturday Night Live and even eventually on Letterman, I mean, you had to be organized with the kind of music you wanted. You had to give the music to the band members. I mean, Anton and Will, these guys are such phenomenal players themselves. They can learn quickly, but you still had to, as a musical director, guide them along the way. How did that all work out?
Well, I don't know. I had something in mind and I was wrong, initially thinking back on the kind of variety show that I witnessed in my college years. Yeah. Everything was written out. And so I thought, well, this is what I'm going to do. And I remember James Brown, first appearance, which all of us who were in the band at the time, the late Hiram, Steve Jordan on drums and Will Lee, none of us have ever forgotten it, Somewhere in heaven, Hiram still remembers it. It was so life-changing for us. But I wrote it out, Sex Machine. It turned out that you really only have to write out 2 bars and then you say, take it to the bridge. And I remember saying, I'm writing a bridge and James is actually going to say, take it to the bridge. And certainly he did. But then I very quickly realized something. And I think maybe I was the first guy to do it. And maybe one of the only guys. Rather than, writing it down or getting an arranger to listen to the record, write down what he hears, then having your musicians read what an arranger, give them the records. This was a revelation that I started. Yeah. Give everybody the record or the tape. In those days, we would make cassettes, dubs, give them out. Let everybody learn their part at home like we used to do when we were kids. And that was the difference that I think you could hear in my little band. We were playing by ear, and from the heart. More so, I think, than when you're reading. And we were loving, just like I loved rock and roll. I was alone. Everybody else was kind of condescending to play. Well, I hired 3 guys who could play anything, all of them. Jazz, classical, anything you wanted. Hiram, bitonal, you name it. But they loved to rock, and we all were having fun. I think that came out in the music.
Boy, there's no doubt that it came out. When I had a chance to go to the Letterman show, invited by Anton and witness the rehearsal and see you guys, I saw a band that really respected each other, that acted like a band. It wasn't like just a bunch of musicians that came in. You guys really were a team that respected each other, that fed off of each other, and were so in the moment that when something happened musically, you all reacted right to it, and that's what made it so exciting.
And that, of course, was what I had hoped would happen. And in the old days with the four pieces on NBC, it was easier to do that. You know, you only got four guys, and I hired three guys who knew all the same songs as I did. Yeah. And they not only knew rock and roll, but they knew standards. They knew, My Funny Valentine or anything you needed to play, so we could all just hit it and play it. Once you get horns, oh boy, they start to need charts.
Yeah.
Will you have a chart? What note? And then it gets much harder.
Yeah.
To do, but we still managed to do it. Just forge ahead. And again, trying to find guys who just knew the songs that I knew. And when it comes to horns, it was even more difficult to find horn players familiar with the rock and roll repertoire who were still good. The good guys who practiced very often were the jazz cats who just would play rock and roll, but, weren't crazy about it. It's hard to find guys who loved it and could play like, the Brecker brothers or something.
Well, it seems like fate brought you into New York to kind of find that blend, to bring in that rock and roll heart that New York needed. And you're right, it was heavy jazz influence. Even when I go back and think about, you did some things with John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd. I mean, there was a fun factor that you maintained in the music with no matter who you were working with, which really is a special gift that you have.
Very nice of you. Certainly it was time to bring rock and roll to a talk show, when Johnny Carson's big band played. That's what was on the radio at the time, but now it was time to rock, for goodness sakes. It was the 80s. Howard Shore did it on SNL, but he was still, we were writing original tunes. I wrote some original tunes for it, and they were R&B, certainly R&B, but big band R&B. When I came, got my daily gig, I just said, I'm not going to write out every, let me just play songs that I know. You get a couple of dollars if you write a cue, if it's an original song. I'll forfeit that. I just don't want to work that hard. Let me just play a great Smokey Robinson tune, and everyone will have fun, and his accountant will be happy. But the main thing was we were all happy, and I didn't have to go home and write, every night, because there was another show the very next night.
But that had to be a part of your personality, to want to make everybody happy and keep this happy feeling and keep this positive energy always going, which you pulled off every night for many, many years.
We certainly liked playing. We liked playing together. And of course, David Letterman was the best. It all comes back to him.
Yeah.
And he was totally spontaneous. He never wanted to pretend that something was the case if it wasn't really the case. If the script came in and said, so-and-so, a celebrity just happened to be walking by, came in and said, no, he said, they didn't have, the audience won't believe that. Just say what it is. We asked them to come by, whatever. And it just made it more real.
Yeah.
And then if something happened, David would change the whole show on a dime. If somebody from the audience said such and such, so-and-so back home, he'll just say, well, let's get him on the phone after the commercial. Now we're on the phone with somebody from Iowa, and, and now I got to play some, you're Iowa stubborn because of your and whatever it is, it's a totally different show. And we had so much fun swinging with that we didn't get bored. We didn't get jaded. And that was because of David.
Well, David is a whole nother talent. I got a kick out of the fact that Anton's DVD had David playing some drums and doing some comedy and just, having fun with music. It was just so great to see.
David was, as you know, a broadcaster. When he started out, he was a weatherman, and he was also a DJ a little bit.
Yeah.
So he was much more aware of the music than one would have thought. He heard every single note we played, and would react to it, including if he didn't like something, he would react to it right on the air. Paul, what was that? You know what? And I'd have to defend it or whatever right on the air. What a challenge, though. And no other show is like that. I don't think any other show is spontaneous. Certainly, reality television isn't like that. They have a story arc and writers and everything. Well, we didn't have any of that. Well, unless it was a sketch, of course, something written, then that was obvious. Otherwise, though, it was just him talking and us responding. So it was an awful lot of fun.
We have all these younger musicians that watch these interviews, and I always ask them while they're watching it, if there's a name that is mentioned that they don't know who it is, but someone like yourself mentioned it, I ask them to stop and do the research of who that name was so they can go back and understand more of what influences, were a part of your life. So just name me a few different bands that were a part of your life that were really influential in your development of what you do. Who would you say?
Well, of course, my favorite, the Four Seasons, I mentioned them again, but I just, would break down those records and try to hear everything. What is the magic? Something magical about it. And I'm still listening to them. And of course, the Phil Spector records, the Ronettes, Darlene Love's records, and for him. I don't know. I loved soul music, when that started happening. Aretha Franklin, the Rascals, and everything that was around it. In my day, the Zombies out of England, as far as a keyboard-centered rock band. Rod Argent, I would slow down his solos. She's Not There, I can still play note for note. And also Time of the Season. So I would do that back in the day when we had records, I slow them down and play them over and over again and learn solos that way. And then, of course, ideally, you want to turn it into your own style and your own solos. But if I'm playing and somebody plays She's Not There, I'm going to play that Rod Argent solo every single time.
How fantastic. Well, I want, again, this younger generation, I want them to really kind of heed your words well, because it's going back and listening to this music that's going to give them the foundation of how you develop what you did. But let me ask you, what motivates you? What motivates Paul Shaffer?
I think, the feeling that I get from the music. That's what motivated me as a kid to get that feeling again. Differing from these guys who saw the Beatles on Sullivan, because I think when they saw them, they said, that's what I could do. But I didn't really say that. I didn't think it was possible to be a musician. I just said, I love that sound. I want to try to do that and create it myself. More fun than buying the record. Until one came along, I think, Can't Hurry Love by the Supremes was just the record sounded. So I got to buy that one, So I did buy a few, but otherwise, just the fun you can have by recreating those sounds was what motivated me.
Beautiful. Paul, you have played with and have backed up Eric Clapton, B.B. King, Gloria Estefan. There's so many, Diana Ross. There's so many people. You mentioned Burt Bacharach. These are massive legends in the industry, which has lifted you, whether you want to be humble or not, well, it lifted you to that legendary status, that because of playing with all these musicians, you have been associated with such great music, which has been a wave, not just in American culture, but in global culture, that you are studied for all these people that you have worked with. Is there any one highlight that stands out that you felt you learned the most from?
I don't know about learn the most, because it was learning all the time. Do you know what a Charleston is?
Absolutely. Da, 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 absolutely.
Right, but so that's a song and a dance, but also, it's a figure, ba, ba, that's a Charleston.
Yeah.
I had to learn that one day, somebody said, take it from the Charlestons. What's that? And then, so I learned. And still going along. But as far as thrills, I've got to say that being in the studio in the 90s with Phil Spector on something that never came out, but there was 30 of us simultaneously in the studio playing and creating the wall of sound and seeing how it was done. Yeah, I don't think anything tops that, except maybe playing with Ray Charles.
Yeah.
Which I got to do a number of times. First time on SNL when he hosted and was musical guest. And, you know, people didn't think he would be able to do it, but there's Brill, you know, he said, just lay it on me. And he was just terrific. But during the rehearsal, stopped the whole band and turned and said, "Organ," meaning me. And he said, "Play with some soul." And I almost died. I not being able to, but luckily the late Howard Johnson was in the band and he said, "Ray, he's got it, count it off again." And, you know, and I somehow summoned, you know, all my dad's records and he said, "That's more like it." And, you know, that, I think getting through that was a highlight.
But that's absolutely amazing. You know, as I said, this younger generation that watches this, Paul, and they follow you musically, they listen to your recordings, they listen to all the different things that you've done. They're watching all now the reruns of the Letterman Show, which you're on. So they watch those and they learn from those, and they're seeing all these musicians that you backed up. In closing, what would you say to this younger generation that can prepare them for the music industry today? It has changed dramatically when you and I were younger. So what would you say to this generation now? They have their sparkle in their eyes that they want to be in the music industry. What advice would you give them, Paul?
My only strategy was just get out and play, take everything. Yeah. But it's not really like that, you know, live playing in clubs. I don't know, you know, it's moved onto the internet now where you get discovered. And obviously I can't comment on that. I'm not an expert there. I will say that the overall advice that one hears today in most places, follow your dreams. I think it's the opposite of what I often say to people when they say any advice. I usually say, if there's anything else you can do besides music and entertainment, do it. Because you need to be in a position where it's the only thing you can do. I found that out in college. I couldn't do sociology and psychology. I got too sad and depressed. Yeah. When I started playing, I said, this is more like, I felt like a person, and I realized I couldn't do anything else. So I say, if you can't, if it's not the only thing you could do, you'll find something else, you're going to drop out. It's not worth it. Yeah. You get so much rejection, you know. So that's if it's nothing else you can do, go ahead, stick with it. Otherwise, go do something else. You better off.
Well, that actually is really good advice, Paul. It really makes tremendous sense. And this young generation, they're going to have their challenges, much like you and we had our challenges when we were younger. But there's that perseverance that you seem to carry, that you just keep on going on. You know, quitting is not an option. You're still at a top creative point in your life. You're still outperforming. You're still doing all this stuff. With the Grammys and with everything that you've done, you're still pushing more for tomorrow also, which is truly inspiring.
Nice of you to say. You know, the music keeps you going. But you know, don't hold me to this, but I also don't think you have to do it until you die or on stage or anything, you know. At a certain point, it's nice to, you know, to sit back and let others have some of the fun. I had more than my share, you know, and continue to have more than my share. So you don't necessarily have to do it forever.
Well, for sure, with all the different areas of the entertainment business, between, as I said, performing, producing, musical director, acting, arranging, you've had so many aspects of what you've widened your scope to what you did. You have inspired and continue to inspire. And for that, Paul, I thank you so much on behalf of the Artist Series at a Distance. You are the best. Thank you so much.
You know, it was fun to be with you on Sessions today. And thanks for having me. I've been watching it for so long. Now there's one with me. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Paul. Fantastic. Dom Famularo here, the Sessions panel. This is so exciting. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Click the subscribe button to be a part of what we're doing. The views help us tremendously. All of your comments, we read them and react to them. This is incredible. The support you're giving us is great. The Sessions panel. We'll see you real soon.